it.
Okay. Okay, now we're set. Okay, so my name is Kelly Kearns, and I serve as a co-lead of the Wisconsin Monthly Meeting Team, and I'll be starting out as a moderator this evening, and then we'll be joined by Susan Nossel and Julia Isaacs, with lots of behind-the-scenes assistance from Marion Friedel and Christina Cook. So the five of us serve as the monthly meeting team, hosting these meetings each month, and it looks like we're all set with the meeting being on. Okay, so you might want to, if you haven't answered your question, the icebreaker question about what's your preferred friendly transportation option in the chat, go ahead and put that in there if you'd like. Okay, so we sometimes start our meetings by sharing some good news on climate. So today's good news is the pause announced on permits for liquid natural gas export facilities that was announced a week ago on Friday. A quote from a news report from Time magazine in Washington said the Biden administration said Friday, January 26th, it was delaying construction of new natural gas export terminals in the United States. The decision aligns with the Democratic president with environmentalists who fear the huge increase in exports of liquid natural gas, or LNG, is locking in potential catastrophic planet warming emissions. Industry groups and Republicans condemned the pause as a win for Russia, while environmentalists cheered it as a way to address climate change and counter Biden's approval of the huge Willow oil project in Alaska last year. So I'm announcing this because we want to make sure this doesn't fall under the radar. And also we have Julia Isaacs with us tonight. She was going to be in DC protesting about this, trying to get them to do this, and they've already done it. So we have Julia with us tonight. So let's do a short little breaths here. We'll take a couple of breaths together. In a second. So we also use this time to acknowledge the different indigenous tribes that lived on these lands for many years before European settlers arrived and forcibly removed them. I am currently located in the traditional territory of the Ho-Chunk people, who have an ancestral lineage dating back to prehistory. Early European explorers called them the Wisconsin Winnebago tribe. But in 1994, when the tribe adopted its present constitution, the nation reclaimed their original name, Ho-Chunk, or the people of the big voice. They called the Madison area where many of us live, Dejope, which means 4 lakes. And this photo is one of those 4 lakes. I won't try to pronounce the name in Ho-Chunk, but it meant Great Teepee Lake. It's what we now call Lake Monona. Okay, now we're going to give you a preview of tonight's meeting. We're currently in the opening welcome, and I want to extend a warm welcome to anyone who's here for the first time, especially we have a lot of folks here from Chicago with us tonight, and I think there's some from Milwaukee as well. So thank you for coming. Hope you feel welcome. We want to publicly state that we want 350 Wisconsin public meetings to be welcome and supportive for all people, regardless of background or identity. In a few minutes, I'll turn the moderation over to Susan Nossel, who serves both on the monthly meeting team and the climate justice team of 350 Wisconsin. And Susan will introduce our 2 speakers from the People's Response Network. I'm really looking forward to hearing their presentation, and we'll have time for a Q&A with them after their presentation. And then we'll hear a few updates and action items from our various teams and the 350 staff. And at the end of the evening, we'll have our optional breakouts, where we'll have newcomers will be invited to stay in the main room for an extra welcome. And then those who interested will be invited to a Zoom breakout for more Q&A with our speakers. And you'll select your own breakout there. Should be pretty easy for you. So I think we're ready to hear our speakers. So Susan, if you could do the introductions, please.
Okay, well, thank you so much and welcome everyone. Can folks hear me? Okay, great. We're so pleased to be joined by Lonette Sims and Dr. Howard Ehrman and others from the People's Response Network this evening. So thank you, a special welcome to you. And Lonette is a community organizer from Chicago. She's the chair of the People's Response Network. Dr. Howard Ehrman is a former Chicago Assistant Health Commissioner and a former assistant professor at the University of Illinois in Chicago. He is co-founder of the People's Response Network, and you'll hear more about this network this evening. And working to protect vulnerable and under-resourced community members from extreme weather is one of the many important community health issues that Lonette, Howard, and the People's Response Network address. So they do they're involved in many different projects. And Howard and Lonette are wonderful leaders who create a welcoming, caring environment and provide much encouragement and kindness to others. Lonette and Howard, we turn it over to you, and welcome to everyone tonight. Thank you. Oh, shall I also say that if you have questions, please put them in the chat too. Thank you so much.
And Lonette, you may need to unmute yourself.
Thank you. I didn't realize I was still muted. Thank you so much for the invitation and inviting us. We look forward to sharing a little snapshot of the work that we've done. So I titled this Heat and Climate Change. It's a small capture of the work that we did in the Chicago heat campaign. And next slide, please. So before we talk about the Chicago heat mapping project and how we galvanize people to be involved, it's important for us to first start the discussion about the history of redlining, right? So I got this definition from the Federal Reserve History website, and they define redlining as the practice of denying people access to credit because of where they lived, even if they are qualified for loans. So the practice started under the Federal Housing Administration, and it ended due to the Fair Housing Act of 1968. But I will add that we still see lack of access in disadvantaged communities, especially when it comes down to home appraisal rates, right? Black and brown homeowners, they don't get their houses appraised at the same level. In addition, certain neighborhoods do not accept CHA vouchers. So that's its own type of redlining in the modern sense. But it's still important to recognize the historical practice from the 1930s. Neighborhoods that were deemed redlined were closer to the expressways, railroads, vacant lots, and have less access to tree canopy and parks, more air pollution. And next slide, please. So this is a map from the Federal Reserve. Unfortunately, this is only half of Chicago. It's not the full map of the city of Chicago, but it gives a brief overview of how neighborhoods were deemed creditworthy and others were deemed not creditworthy. Next slide, please. So in 1995, Chicago experienced the deadliest heat wave. And most people don't know that heat kills more people than any other natural climate disaster in America. 739 people lost their lives. Black Americans died at twice the rate than white Americans during the heat wave. Most people couldn't afford air conditioning. So programs like Light Heat are very critical to making sure that people have access to help to pay for the utility bills and no cooling ordinance. Next slide, please. So People's Response Network, we applied with the city of Chicago We started the process in the summer of 2022, but we officially applied in the winter of 2022. We found out that we were one of the cities and early 2023. So we use environmental justice principles, making sure that people from the communities most impacted by the 1995 heat wave, most impacted by the urban heat island effect, had a chance to participate and have equal access in this project. Next slide, please. So one of the ways that we as PRN recruited is we hosted film screenings of the film Cook Survival by Zip Code. How many people are familiar with that film? It's okay if you can say yay or nay in the chat. Thank you, Thank you, Barbara Smith. But if you haven't got a chance, please view the film Cook Survival by Zip Code. It really illustrates who was most impacted and the city's deadly response during it. So we had 4 in-person film screenings, and we had it in the areas most impacted. We also hosted a film screening for SEIU Healthcare, and we had 1 virtual film screening that Susan Nozzle, shout out to you. She helped moderate that film screening. And just to give one important point, each time that we had these film screenings, it gave a different emotional reaction. Some people vividly remembered 1995 heat wave to the point that they had to leave when certain images came on the screen. I had one woman who actually lost her grandfather during the 1995 heat wave. In addition, like 1995, even though that was one significant event, but we've still experienced heat waves every year. And in 2022, 3 African American women in the Rogers Park neighborhood died. So we made sure to contact the alderwoman and have a screening there because of what just happened, and had a conversation with the residents. Next slide, please. So we partnered with various community organizations. One of them is called Communities Organized to Win. So their main focus is about public safety. One of the founders of that organization was a police officer during the 1995 heat wave, and he vividly remembers having to pull seniors' deceased bodies out from the senior buildings. In addition, we had Northside Action for Justice, who helped mobilize residents on the north side, especially because the north side, even though it's a more diverse population, during 1995, they had a lot of senior room occupancy buildings. So they also experienced fatalities during those buildings, and in the Rogers Park neighborhood has a lot of senior buildings as well. So we are proud to say that we recruited 18 volunteers, and nine out of the 29 routes were from people from that who we recruited. Next slide, please. So activation day was actually July 28th of 2023. It was the 3rd hottest day of the year. It wasn't the hottest day, but it was the best logistical day that the city planning team and the community members decided to capture the data. So we captured heat measurements 3 different times. Once early morning once in the afternoon and then once in the early evening. And this report is done by Kappa Strategies. They do all the reports from the cities that have done this in years prior. And they found that it was a 22-degree difference difference in temperatures between the hottest and the coolest areas. They use the term transverse points data, and that just means the heat measurements collected by the participants on activation day. And then they also use the term area-wide models, which is defined as generated through analysis of the transverse points and their surrounding landscape. So next slide, please. So here's some more images from the Kappa Strategies map. Anytime you see the dark red, that stands for the hottest area, and blue is the coolest area. So the transverse is the actual route. So all these little squiggly lines that you see is the routes that people drove that day during the afternoon shift. And then this is the area-wide model to accompany it. And next slide, please. So in addition, People's Response Network, we try to do solidarity locally, nationally, and globally whenever we can. We are a very small group, but we make sure to reach out to organizers from all across the city. And we are grateful that we now have, a connection with Wisconsin climate justice organizers. So we reached out to Mississippi Rising Coalition, also American Descendants of Slavery, Mississippi chapter, and Mississippi Green New Deal, because they were organizing to get resources for the residents who were impacted by the EF2 tornado, and they have never recovered. In addition, the organizers are interested in doing their own heat map because they know from the tornadoes and that they experience in hurricanes that heat is also an unreported and deadly factor of people losing their lives in the Gulf Coast. And I'm going to pass it to Dr. Howard Ehrman. I'm also going to put more information in the chat links.
Thank you so much, Lonette. And again, like Lonette, I really want to thank 350.org, in particular Susan, who's not only invited us here, but has really participated often in PRN, along with Barb Smith from Madison, who I hope both of you will comment later on. If we could go back to Lonette's presentation for a minute, just to before I start mine, because there's some things that need clarification. Yeah, that's a good slide right there. So just to clarify, this is incredibly significant, and some of you may have started seeing this on the ground heat mapping beginning in around 2017, 2018, including a map of Washington, D.C. in the front of National Geographic's, which kind of put heat mapping on the map. For decades, satellites that are run by NOAA and NASA basically have been doing sentinel heat mapping from space. This is pretty good, but not nearly as accurate and as important and as significant, and showing this differentiation as we now have seen in over 60 cities in the United States and a dozen cities internationally in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. This is a very simple instrument, but it is, kind of delicate, touchy, where you basically put it on the window of the passenger side of the car. It's connected to GPS by multiple points. So it's not just a single point. It's, I think, a triple point, better than an Apple Watch. And basically, you drive a defined route. Now, I just want to talk a little bit about the contradictions here, because everybody here no matter who you are, no matter where you live, no matter what race, gender you identify with, or class, is going to have these problems with the government. Number one is that the government wants people to think that heat islands are basically big downtown buildings for the most part. If you go on the US EPA website, if you go on heat.gov, which is run by NOAA and other government agencies, that's what they show you in a picture. A picture's worth 1,000 words. We know, whether you live in Chicago, Milwaukee, or Green Bay in particular, that there are heat islands in places where there are railroads, where there are big expressways, where there are big warehouses, existing factories, and past factories that have left huge, particularly in Chicago, which had the most factories per square mile until 1970 in the world, leaves these huge concrete foundations, which are just massive heat islands. So that's one thing. People in their own communities, no matter who you are or where you live, people here in Wisconsin, 350, know the cool places near where you live or work and know the hot places. This is not rocket science. If you've lived there a year or two and you've lived through hotter and hotter summers, you know this. Therefore, people have the right to develop their own routes. And this became a pretty contentious issue with the city and with Kappa Strategies, who is a contractor of NOAA. We don't like that whole arrangement. We think that the federal government should have its own employees, but as we know, in the last 40 years, more and more is contracted out. And so we didn't even find out to the last week that we could have decided the routes. Instead, we went back and forth with the city of Chicago multiple times because they did not include the most important heat islands in black and brown neighborhoods. And the last thing I'll say is the question of what do you do about heat islands? 99% of people say, stick a tree in the ground. I think everybody here has probably planted a tree or wants to plant a tree. That's a great solution, and it takes on the average about 8 to 10 years for that tree to be effective. And also a lot of people are doing monoculture, like the largest planted forest in the history in China. That's not the only or necessarily the most important solution. There has to be other real solutions to heat islands, and we're going to talk about that in the next presentation. So that's just some of about this that's real important. So we can go to my presentation, and we're happy to take questions, and we really encourage people to put questions in the chat. Susan, yeah, okay, great, or Christina. All right, so I was fortunate in 1996 to be invited to where, as far as we know, these are the oldest living humanoid footprints in Liatola, Tanzania, who were shown to Mary Leakey about 45 years ago by indigenous nations within Tanzania. These footprints are at least 3.6 million years old. There have been several more also located in the last 20 years. So what's the importance of this? And the importance of the slide on the right, which is a recent celebration of, in the Amazon, of various indigenous nations who have won some important victories recently. And that is that the only way that we've ever survived is through collectively doing things together. You know, there are two paths that human beings have taken, or humanoids, through 3.6 million years. We either kind of destroyed the environment, either intentionally or unintentionally. Easter Island is just one of many. People should not be romanticizing indigenous peoples. I'm half indigenous Berber from Morocco. We've been here at least 10,000 years. People made mistakes and people did a lot of good things. But that's the only way we've survived, is to basically figure out what's the right thing to do and to do it collectively, not based on individualism, which is how our society under capitalism, particularly the last 40 or 50 years, has developed. Next slide. Okay, so what's the first really important environmental justice principle that was established by the people of Warren County? If you're not familiar with Warren County, that was where in the 1970s, people discovered there was going to be a PCB dump in the middle of African American owned farms. And people began a process of using the civil rights movement, nonviolent direct action, to stop and remove it. That took almost 20 years, but they did win. So we have to really not just listen to, not just invite those most affected to meetings, not just ask them if they want to work together, but to follow their leadership of survival. On the left, you can see this. This is not the Amazon. This is the most sustainable forest as determined by the United Nations, UNESCO, NASA, and many other agencies. It's the Menominee Forest in Wisconsin, where several of us visited formally with that nation. I don't use the word tribe, I use the word nation, in 2019. It's one of the most amazing experiences I've had in almost 77 years. I would really encourage any of you who have not had a relationship with the Menominee, who have their own college, have their own ecology programs, et cetera, to find out about going there. If you don't have that relationship, I'd be happy to help if possible. So on the left is the Menominee Forest, and on the right are traditional monoculture farming in that part of Wisconsin, which is about 45 minutes north of Appleton. That's how I know it, because my son lives in Appleton. On the right is basically people from Little Village and Pilsen. Those are two of the largest Mexican-American neighborhoods in the country, next to East LA, the largest ones, who basically fought for 14 years. We were part of that, my family. This house you're looking at is 40 years old. We've been here 40 years, rather, in this neighborhood, longer than that. The way that we got people involved in the struggle was not to primarily talk about environmental justice, or even to talk about how there were 2,500 deaths in 80 years that this one coal power plant was open. This was the largest coal power plant inside any large city at the time, 1998, that we started the struggle, and 2012 when we closed this and another coal power plant a couple miles away. The way we got people involved was to go door to door with our electricity bill from Commonwealth Edison, which is part of Exelon, the largest utility in the country. And we said, here's what we're paying more and more each year for this bill, and it's killing us. None of the electricity generated in these plants ever went to anybody in the city of Chicago. It was sold on the open market, like most places, yet it was killing people. And of course, not coincidence, the city of Chicago basically blew up that smokestack and killed at least a couple more people 3 years ago. Next slide, please. So what we have to do, of course, is what everybody here, I'm sure, is involved in. Let's try to keep fossil fuels in the ground. We're going to get into that in a minute, but that's not enough, because we now are in survival time. And we're going to talk about those details, but we have to reach out to people we don't know, not just to people we do know. Literally our neighbors, even if we don't know them, people we work with, where we study, play, and pray. So on the left are people preparing for an incoming hurricane before it happened. We have to completely flip the model of FEMA and the federal government to, here's your list, $125 of stuff, go to Walmart, get it yourself, protect your family, good luck. That's not going to work for 90% of people. We have to collectivize this, whether it's cooling, water, etc. And we have to continue to do what we did at Standing Rock, which is on the right, to try to stop every single project that's going to take fossil fuels, and I would add uranium, out of the ground. Next slide, please. So this beautiful poster on the left came from a combination of mestizo people in Ecuador working with the people of the Yasuni, which most ecologists feel is the most diverse part of the Amazon in Ecuador, where there was a partial victory last year, maybe, about not drilling oil in part of the Yasuni that I'm sure some people here know about. But that's not enough. because this is like the dog chasing the tail. The vast majority of the big greens, including what was said in the New York March in September last year, is we have to end fossil fuels. We are not going to end fossil fuels anytime soon unless we have collective energy conservation and reduction first. We have known since before September in 1965, when Professor Barry Commoner told us this at Washington University, that the absolutely lowest hanging fruit to reduce emissions in modern urban society is to do energy retrofits, which consists primarily of air sealing and putting in as much insulation as is viable for every single building on Mother Earth. This will save lives from people dying of heat. This will save lives from people dying of freezing temperatures. It's not primarily about right now, let's stick in as many heat pumps as we can. Heat pumps are great if you got the money. Maybe they're going to work, really in the coldest weather. Maybe they're not. That's still a question mark. But heat pumps should not come before this. And this is a major expansion that has to happen of the weatherization program. I hope that Barb Smith can talk about this, from the floor during the meeting. Next slide, please. And that's just one of many examples. This is what we're facing. The most esteemed climate scientist in the United States, who we don't all agree with, particularly on the question of nuclear fission, is Dr. James Hansen. This is his latest newsletter from literally 4 weeks ago with two other climate scientists from around the world, showing not just the acceleration of climate change, but the reasons for it, including Super El Nino, which will at least be with us until June 30th. Wildfires to the right of that in Hawaii, which devastated one of the most indigenous areas on the islands. To the left, yesterday on the coast of Chile, where at least 116 people have died, probably several hundred, and the wildfires are spreading into more populated areas. And then the bottom right, the floods in San Diego two weeks ago, which were incredibly devastating, with just literally 2 to 3 inches of rain. Next slide. Susan asked me to show you this, and this is super important. This is true all over the United States, including wherever any of you are in Wisconsin, Illinois, or any other place. We have a huge disconnect between the reality of the human body and other animal species, and what is the actual threshold action indicator of every single government agency at the federal, state, and local level about when to do something about the heat. The bottom slide shows that beginning with a temperature humidity index, which temperature humidity index is not necessarily the most accurate. We're not going to get into all that. There's watt bulb readings that are more accurate in a lot of places, but that's another debate. So the temperature humidity index begins to affect the most important mechanism we have physiologically of cooling our body by sweat evaporating, beginning at 80. That's the yellow. Now, people who are older, particularly over 65, who have underlying medical conditions, they start getting into trouble at 80, okay? A lot more of us get into trouble at 90, and everybody gets into trouble at 100, okay? This is now what you're looking at right now, the lowering of the heat index for Chicago after the 1995 heat wave. I want to say it again. This is lower than it was before. This is lower than in most places like Milwaukee and Madison and Green Bay. So what does it say? 3 consecutive days. The heat index has got to be 100 to 105, 2 days 105 to 110, or 1 day 110 or higher. And they're not going to issue heat warnings, which are the most significant things that's supposed to trigger cooling centers opening up, whether that's your library, a field house, whatever it is, a school. They're not going to trigger it in most cases. And a lot of places, particularly rural America, particularly the poor areas of rural America, particularly the South and other areas of people of color, African Americans, Latino, Native Americans, they don't even have government cooling centers. They have maybe a church or school that they voluntarily run. And this is coming from people in Mississippi we just talked to. Lonette's made this important connection for us. Next slide. Okay, so what are we going to do now? Somehow 2020. 24. So, you know, what we're facing this year could be far worse than last year. We can't say that for sure, but based on Super El Nino, we can sort of make that prediction. Heat, fires, floods, tornadoes, earthquakes, by the way, are affected by climate change. It's not as well known, but there's very good data for the last 15 years on that. So what are we going to do? Okay, the first thing we're going to do is talk and try to work with those most affected. Those are people inside who have underlying conditions, who don't have air conditioning, or a lot more people have air conditioning in Chicago than they did in 1995, but a lot more people are not going to flip the switch to turn it on because they can't afford the fact that it's 4 times higher than it was in 1995. And that's true all over the country, not necessarily that much, but that's the big problem. Because people have an AC unit in their window doesn't mean they're going to turn it on. We have to reach out to workers. Who are the most common workers we're going to reach out to? Well, how about the people that deliver your mail? Many more of whom died, not just the one gentleman in Dallas last year, but many more of whom died. The 22-year-old with no underlying conditions based on autopsy who died in Los Angeles County the year before in a UPS truck that's not air conditioned. And by the way, the new agreement does not air condition any existing UPS trucks. It's going to take 15 years to replace all the UPS trucks with air conditioning, but none of the ones that exist now are going to have air conditioning. So that's the mail workers. We're reaching out right now. We've already made contact with the largest letter carriers union, which is in Chicago, 80% African American, to begin giving them masks. And we're going to develop hopefully a postcard with them about what to do when the heat comes. The masks are not primarily for COVID in the sense of we have distributed 25,000 masks for COVID. The masks are basically when the AQI, the air quality index, hits 300 or 400 like it did last year. And that included Milwaukee. I'm not sure about Madison. Construction workers, and certainly farm workers, of which there are thousands in Wisconsin in the summer. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the last one. This is just part of a list of what are we going to do right now. We have 3 months maybe until the next heat wave hits, until the next fires start in Canada or wherever they're going to start and the smoke starts blowing down to us. So we talked about N95 masks. We had 5,000 of those left. If people want any more, what we're suggesting people to do is to collectively start buying them. There are no more free N95 masks in the sense of Project N95, which some of you may have worked with, unfortunately closed doors December 31st. We'd certainly be happy to share 1,000 or more with people if you want to come get them from Wisconsin. We have to collectively prepare on our blocks, in our schools, in our churches, mosques, synagogues, wherever we're talking about literally doing a census of whoever wants to participate. Who's at most risk? Who's got cooling spaces? You know, water, collectively prepare for that. Does the school not just have an air conditioner? Does the school have a backup generator when there's a blackout, which there's going to be more of? Okay. More cooling centers the government's got to run, and we've got to change that criteria from 110 or whatever to 90. If the THI, the temperature humidity index, makes 90, it's got to be a trigger right there. Public transit cooling buses, that's been used in lots of places, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Miami, other places. A local cooling ordinance. We worked with Maria Haddon, the alderwoman, to get a cooling ordinance, the first one in history, but it's only for senior buildings that are Section 8 and public. LIHEAP expansion's got to happen everywhere. It exists now in about 25, 30 states. It's got to happen in every state. Cool pavement, cool roofs are the special white paint that's been used now for a few years in Las Vegas, Phoenix. It's got to be used in Milwaukee, Chicago, and other places in those neighborhoods that are mostly risk. The weatherization program we talked about, that's got to be massively expanded. The private heat island owners, okay? The biggest robber barons in the history of the United States are not the banks, they're the railroads. The railroads got to pay. The Amazon warehouse, you know, in Kenosha has got to pay. They got to put community solar on their roof. Not for Amazon, but for the community in Kenosha, in Racine, in all the other Amazon warehouses all over the place. And lastly, we invite you to show the Cook Survival by Zip Code film, and we'd be happy to come virtually to any showing, you know, like we did with a national audience this summer. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Howard and Lynette. We really appreciate your sharing this very invaluable information with us. And we do have a few questions, and then in a few minutes, we'll be moving to the breakout rooms where we'll have a chance to have more in-depth discussion. And also hear from some of the other folks that are on the call today who were the resident scientists helping to make the measurements. So there were a couple questions about accessing information to results from other cities. And so I wondered, and including questions about whether there have been other cities in Wisconsin that have done heat mapping projects. Thank you.
Yes, Milwaukee, Wisconsin has done the heat mapping project, and also those results should be on NOAA's website and heat.gov, if I'm correct. If not, Dr. Howard, he can correct me. You're muted.
Sorry. So yeah, so basically we just put in the chat, let me make it a little smaller. You can see it just real briefly. And then, you know, we really invite you to go and look for yourselves. This is the NOAA website with all the campaigns. The other thing we didn't talk about, but let Lynette explain, we were basically the only group that insisted that people from their own neighborhoods do their own mapping. Honestly, most of the other places, it was white college students, professors, and environmentalists who went into neighborhoods of color with a few exceptions. So Chicago was both the largest city to do this, but also we had the most people. It wasn't perfect because the city didn't develop those relations like they should have. We had a capacity to cover about a third of the city. But yeah, you can find all the information here, all the reports. For those of you who are interested, we'd be happy to put you in contact with Dr. Vivek Shandis, who is really the person who started all this, who convinced NOAA to start doing this. He's at Portland State University, just really incredible person. So,
Yeah, thanks, Howard. Susan, can I jump in?
Oh, please. Mhm.
Yeah, so I think we may only have time for one more question now. And Lynette, I saw you answered it in the chat, but I think it would be great if you could share with the group the answer to Marion's question about like what are the recommendations that for
Yeah, so the cities that have participated in the NOAA heat mapping project, there's been a big push to increase tree canopy. Some areas in the country like Miami-Dade County, they have a new position called Chief Heat Officer, also Tucson, Arizona, and Los Angeles County. So you might see more municipal offices specifically for heat. Those offices run resources from the health departments and also from emergency management departments. We have seen cooling ordinance specifically. Tucson, Arizona is kind of like ahead of the game in regards to heat mitigation, prevention and mitigation. And also like certain programs like New York has cool pavements, cool roof programs. Arizona has that too. We hope with this project that Chicago starts adapting those programs. It's already been existing, free air conditioning programs, cool roofs, cool payments. But we'll see.
yeah, thanks, Lynette.
Well, thank you so much. Let's all thank Lynette and Howard. And in just a few minutes, we'll have a chance to go to the breakout room and continue the discussion. There's also some other resources that were put into the chat by, you'll see them about heat pumps and about also about the Wisconsin Eco-Latinos work on mapping regarding air quality too. And I think, Margarita, did you want to
Yeah, I just have a
Sure.
quick question. It's wonderful how many people, you mentioned, Howard, how many people came out for to be a community scientist. My question is, because it's a big deal to have folks in the community be participating in this really important research. So what are things that the city could do to uplift, those concerns, and also to figure out how we can't bring more people from the community to also participate? Was there sort of like a maximum people, they only take 100? Is there a way that this can also be part of what the city could do to make sure the voice is heard from all the different communities that are impacted? And at that, in that sort of lens for data, how could we bring more capacity to that?
Would you like to briefly maybe address the question now, but then we'll do a more in-depth. It's an excellent question for
I would
when we go to the breakout
let-
room. When we
let,
go to the
Lynette
breakout room.
maybe you could
Mhm.
answer it first, and then
I think the city of Chicago needs to make a better effort to reach into community-based organizations. So there was an existing list of faith-based institutions and partnership organizations, but certain parts of the city, even though we did the best that we could as PRN, as community partners, didn't have fair representation. So the west side of Chicago did not have citizen scientists that represent West Siders. That was one of the downfalls, and city of Chicago has to make a consistent effort, not just this project, so projects like this that the city applies for, but throughout, especially because it will be better for public safety and public health standpoint. And in the near future, it should be the community-based organizations and faith-based institutions that are doing the wellness checks. Currently in Chicago, the police department does the wellness checks. So city has to make this a priority.
yeah, I would just say real quickly, I think the problem we have is the question of equity, right? Racial, class, gender equity. And what does that mean in a project like this? So being a former academic, I'm sure there's several people here like that, and a former health administrator, I think the problem is that people get ideas. A lot of times it's grant driven or publishing driven. And then they ask the community to participate in their ideas. That's not going to work. It never has, it never will, except maybe to get somebody published and then tenure, or the city gets a nice document published that then collects dust after that. So what we have to talk about now is literally the question of survival. And the only way that's going to work is if the community organizes itself, and then to put demands, on all levels of government. Demands which are not unreasonable. These are demands for people to survive. So, we want to work cooperatively with the city, but we're not going to let the city or the state or the federal government dictate to us like they did with COVID, like they're doing now with this, heat thing, which, by the way, they've given the project, just so you know this, they've literally given the project, the data is still public, to the Buffett Institute. That is Warren Buffett's sister, the greatest coal train magnate in the world, who is already funded tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars to Northwestern University to carry on this work. Does that sound right to anybody here?
I don't know if I'll answer that question, but I would like to thank you again for your presentation. We're gonna, could everyone, I think people already did put up a hand for applause for thank you, but thank you so much. We're gonna move now. Could we bring the slides up to some Q&A? Not some Q&A, we just finished Q&A, to some announcements, and then we will have time for additional questions with our speakers from Chicago. So we do like to keep these meetings interactive, which is why I've appreciated the Q&A. And so now we're going to do a poll. And so, Marion, are you going to introduce the poll before Christina pulls it up?
Yes, I will. As many of you know, we at 350 Wisconsin as an organization have been are committed to climate justice. And we've been working for about a year to modify and strengthen our goals, practices, policies, and strategies. And now we'd like to learn from you about your knowledge and interest in our climate justice work. So that will be what this poll is about.
If you're a co-host, you probably can't see the poll. Is that true, Marion, Julia?
I can see it,
You
actually.
can see it. Oh,
Yeah.
hey. Okay, great. Can people who are not co-hosts see the poll? I see people voting, so I hope that's a good sign.
You want us to start answering now, or?
Go ahead.
Yep.
Oh, okay,
Please
got
answer now. Mhm.
It's
We're
submitted.
allowing time now for you to
I
answer
got-
the poll question.
Okay.
Diane, I forgot to ask you, did you want us to show the results live, or are you just going to take them back and look at them later? Sorry to put you on the spot, but
That's okay. I think we didn't actually talk about that. Did we, Miriam?
We did not. What does our
the
group think?
questions disappeared. You should be able to scroll
Live.
down to see more questions.
I think the poll is still open. I don't know if I can show the results, to be honest.
Let's not worry about that. We'll save
Okay.
them and share them with Diane and
Okay.
Marion and Janice and the rest of the group. We'll give you a few more minutes. What do you think, Christina? Do we have enough people still working on it?
You know, I can probably leave it up and we can move on to next announcements if that works.
The poll disappeared, people say. Well, I don't know what's going on. It is true that when people sign in as 350 Wisconsin, it gets confused, but we thought we had to do it. So
I still see the poll. I said I still see the poll. We got 76% participation right now.
Emily says if you click poll at the bottom of your screen, it should come back. Thank you, Emily. We still appreciate the 2 or 3 questions that you did answer. I'm sorry it was hard. Are we above 76%?
82% now.
Yep, I think.
80%. Okay. Let's go on to the next slide. And
I think this is Emily.
think you'll have to take down the poll, close the poll so people can see the slide. Okay. Emily Park is, besides answering our Zoom questions, is one of our co-executive directors, and we asked her to tell us a little bit like what's happening with our sister organization.
Hi all, thanks everybody for being here tonight. So I'm gonna take off my 350 Wisconsin hat and put on my 350 Wisconsin action hat. You can tell it's my action hat because it has slightly different colors in the logo. But 350 Wisconsin Action is our sister organization that can do electoral work. And as I'm sure you all know, this is a big year in Wisconsin. We have a lot of really exciting opportunities with the new district maps for the state legislature. We could possibly flip our state legislature and see some really good climate action at the state level. We have the opportunity to flip Congressional District 3, where Republican Derek Van Orden was elected 2 years ago. We have the opportunity to keep Trump out of office. We can protect the Inflation Reduction Act and other climate investments, and also advocate for local, county, and state climate action wherever you live. So these are all some of the really exciting things that are on the horizon for Wisconsin in 2024, which is why we are really excited to be involved in electoral work. Next slide, please. We go to the next slide, please.
I tried. I think my internet is having a hard time.
No worries. So yeah, what is our plan on the 350 Wisconsin action side? This is just a very, very small snippet of what our overall plan is, but we're going to be focusing a lot on interactions that really maximize people's likelihood of turning out to the polls. So we all are getting spammed with, hundreds of texts and hundreds of calls. So we're going to be doing traditional canvassing methods, but really leaning in more to deep canvassing and voter engagement. So focusing on conversations. We're going to be looking at activating particularly rural and youth voters through relational organizing, which is something that we did a lot of in the spring election last year for Judge Janet Protasewicz. And then we will be focusing on key local, state, and federal races to maximize our impact. Just making sure that we are looking at the races where we have the best chance to flip a seat or preserve the seat of a climate champion. So really being careful about which races we're throwing our resources into. Next slide, please. So the important thing to know is there's going to be a lot of volunteer opportunities this year. As I said before, there's deep canvassing and voter engagement. So that's having conversations with people, finding out what they care about. There will be the traditional phone banking and possibly text banking. We'll be tabling at a lot of events. So, at student events, at community events, having our table there with our flyers and talking to people and encouraging them to vote and think about climate when they go to the ballot box. If you're someone who's a little bit more introverted, we have opportunities for content creation. So do you like writing blogs, letters to the editor? Do you like making social media graphics? All sorts of opportunities there. We'll be doing voter registration. We'll be engaging with candidates. So submitting polls to candidates to figure out who we want to endorse, and also going to their public events and asking them questions about climate justice. So that's just a small sampling of some of the things that we'll be doing with 350 Wisconsin Action through the elections in November. So if you're interested in being involved, I hope you go to our website. So for this is 350wisconsinaction.org. So different from our regular website. You can sign up there, or you can email our volunteer coordinator, Nikki, and her email is right there. Or you can also email me if you would like. Next part. Thank you. And how are we doing this, you might ask? We are really excited to say that we have a new organizer on staff with 350 Wisconsin Action. Her name is Jessa Mickey. Unfortunately, Jessa was not able to be here tonight because of a schedule conflict, but she will be here at the March monthly meeting to introduce herself. Really excited for you all to get to know her. She comes to us from a background in health equity and reproductive rights. And I'm really excited to have her on board with the team. And I think you're all going to really like her. And she is based in Stevens Point. Next, please. All right. So shifting gears back to.
Hang on, Emily.
Hmm?
My friend is here.
Oh, okay. He's going to do this one. All right, go ahead.
Turned out I could make it. Sorry, you were on a good roll there, Emily. I didn't mean to interrupt. But breaking in for just a moment to tell you about a big event that we're putting on in Mount Horeb next week. We're doing a hybrid panel discussion on the Farm Bill with several experts on agricultural policy. So I'll keep it in order here. It is next Monday, 1 week from today at 7 p.m. The in-person option will be at the Mount Horeb Community Center, which is at 107 North Grove Street in Mount Horeb, Wisconsin. There will also be a virtual participation option through Zoom. And I see Emily has dropped a registration link for the event into the chat. Yeah, if you're going in person or on Zoom, please fill that out. It'll be very helpful for us to know how many people are coming. And the most important part, the panelists we will have are going to be Darren Von Ruden, who is president of the Wisconsin Farmers Union, which has been a really helpful connection for our work on regenerative agriculture. Margaret Crome, who is the senior policy expert at the Michael Fields Ag Institute, and will give us a short primer on some of the important policy parts about the Farm Bill to know, and 350 Wisconsin's very own Mike McCabe, who was raised on a dairy farm and has written and organized extensively for progressive and climate causes throughout his career. So you can register for the event at the link in the chat, and we will be delighted to see you there in person or on Zoom. It's going to be a really fun and informative night. And it's not just information. We're also going to have actions for you to take, whether you're in person or in Zoom. So I'd love to see you there. And that's all I got. Back to you, Emily.
Mike, can you remind us? I know you're the co-lead of, tell us the name of your new team.
That's right. It is the Regenerative Land Relations Team, which in short focuses on land and nature-based methods to address climate change. Our biggest efforts right now are aimed at regenerative agriculture, but we're also hoping to support things like increasing tree canopy and also preserving agricultural land and open land, preserving it from development specifically, from being built on top of.
Thank you, Mike. And I'm just making sure the new people know that, we have a climate justice team, we have a monthly meeting team, we have a regenerative agricultural team, and these are all teams that we will welcome anyone to join. Emily, why don't you come back and do this slide?
All right, thanks, Julia. Excuse me. So I'm really excited to announce that on Saturday, February 17th, so just in a couple of weeks, 350 Wisconsin, along with Sierra Club, Sustainable Environmental Business Network, and some other organizations locally, are going to be hosting a film screening at the UW-Madison Marquee Theater. We're going to be watching the movies Plastic China and How to Let Go of the World. And then following that will be a panel discussion with Sustain Dane and 350 Wisconsin. And I'm going to put a link into the chat where you can learn more or register. And if you could only join us for one of the movies, that's fine. If you can join us for the whole event, even better. Yeah, so I hope to see you there.
Next slide.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Nikki. I'm the volunteer coordinator for 350 Wisconsin. And I'm here to tell you a little bit about the Solving the Climate Crisis course. So this spring and winter, this course is going to be running at Madison College, and it's put on and designed by Carol Phelps, who is likely here tonight. She usually is. I can't see everybody's name right now. But we have some opportunity if people are interested in attending this class. We have opportunity for people to have a scholarship to attend. Essentially, this course is to gain some more professional education in climate action, training in climate communication, and to be encouraged by the wide variety of climate solutions currently being implemented around the world. And I just put a Google form in the chat. So if you are interested, this does not lock you into anything, but if you are interested in the course, please fill out the Google form here. We would love to have more people learn more, and are really happy to be able to offer a continuing education opportunity. All right, so next thing here, we have our February Volunteer of the Month. Yay! And our Volunteer of the Month this month is Russ Bennett. Yay, Russ! So I think Russ is here tonight as well. Russ is one of the co-leaders of our art collective, and he is being recognized for his creativity, his collaborative spirit, and his kind and open demeanor. And that really helps everyone who work with him feel really welcome. Welcome enough that he is hosting regular potlucks at his house to build community as well as art. He loves to come up with fun new ideas to get people talking about climate change, and is usually featured in various street theater performances. And he and the rest of the art collective really have a dedication to bringing the joy to climate work, especially because this can feel like really overwhelming and bleak subject matter sometimes. Speaking of which, his email subject lines are always amusing. I always look forward to them. And most recently, he shared our Protect All the Water music video with Jason Momoa. For those who don't know, he's the actor who plays Aquaman. And Jason decided to share that video, and it has since gotten 450,000 views. So that's exciting. So basically, Russ is super cool, and we deeply appreciate everything he's done and continues to do for 350 Wisconsin. Thank you so much, Russ.
Thank you, Russ, and thank you, Nikki. So our next monthly meeting, it will be hard to top this one, but we have another great speaker. Mirtha Sosa Pacheco will be speaking about, well, it's a topic on many of our minds, an introduction to eco-anxiety, climate grief, and I don't know how to pronounce this, solastalgia. And she's with the Center for Healthy Mind at University of Wisconsin-Madison. So this will be a hybrid meeting, so that if you are within, I might say biking distance, of course, it may not be snowing, biking, hiking, walking, bus or driving distance of Madison, we'd love to see you at the Friends Meeting House. We will be on Zoom so that everybody can join us. And that is the first Monday of the month. I'm going to zip through the next two slides. I just want to say that, you know, we do have a tar sands team. I've mentioned the climate justice team. Our newsletter and communications comes from our communication action team. I work on a divest and defund team. Those all meet Monday nights. You could join any of those teams. Next slides. And just want to, the community climate solutions team. You've heard about Russ, and we've mentioned Diane's name and the Art Collective. There's a state policy team, a fundraising team. We got to keep all this going. There's also the monthly meeting team, and we're actually meeting, I guess, in a couple of weeks. So, but next slide. It may be hard to kind of, remember all those teams. So if you're a newcomer, you can just stay here and Nikki will meet with you and tell you more about 350 Wisconsin. But if you are really interested in hearing more from Lonette and Howard, and they have some of their colleagues have joined them, who will also be able to speak in the breakout, we invite you to, in a minute, I guess Marion's going to open up the breakouts and you can go into the Q&A with them. That's about half an hour or so. I always say if you're exhausted, you can sign off for the evening, but thanks everyone for coming. And I apologize to the person who had a question that I didn't answer. It's just too much going on at this point of the evening. So please stay here if you're a newcomer, or else, Marion, can you open the breakouts?
Yes, it's open, but you have to scroll all the way down through the names to find the room. It says Q&A with speakers, and you can just join it. Also, if you are having trouble, I'm happy to help you get into the room as well.
Marion, can you stop the recording?
Oh, yes.
Oh, I forgot to say that. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, everyone.
I did. Let's see.